while we're talking. Yeah, and it's just like, can you wait? Can you wait 10 minutes?
No.
Clean your toenails with your pocket knife, Jen?
When it's got to be done, it's got to be done.
Yeah.
What's the grossest thing you've done in public?
I mean, I've definitely peed on my ankles before. Because, like, men don't understand the struggle. If you're at a concert or something and there's just nowhere to pee, there's really no way as a woman, unless you're really good at squatting, to get your ass back far enough to where you don't end up peeing on your ankles. Because, like...
That should be a kind of exercise that women of a certain age do. Like a certain kind of squat. Like
a piss squat?
Yeah, piss squat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you kind
I'm
of
glad
need
we save all the
something to lean
relatable
against.
stuff for the front so everybody can enjoy it.
Oh, so now we're recording.
We're recording now, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in public...
I'm struck. The things I do in private are heinous and debilitatingly shameful. The things I do, I can't think of anything in public, though. That most of what I do in public's goofy, but I can't think of anything gross that I've done that leaps out at me.
I have caught myself picking my heels.
I've picked foot stuff, like,
Yeah.
on stream. Now, I didn't do it with the camera on it, but I've definitely been fiddling, and what they don't know is I'm picking a piece of skin off my foot, because you're a runner, too.
Yeah.
Weird things grow on your feet when you run a lot. Like,
Yeah.
that is just a thing that happens.
Well, and you also like being barefoot as much as I do, so my heels are just crusty, and there's no amount of Aquaphor that seems to be solving that problem. So eventually, like, there's just a little thing I can get my fingernail in there, and I pick it off. Joe hates it. My husband thinks it's the most disgusting thing I do.
I walk barefoot so often, an FBI profiler would assume I'm into jam bands. That's how much I walk.
Are you not
bare feet.
into jam bands?
No. I've gone to jam band concerts. I've gone to a Fish New Year's Eve show, and I've gone to a Dave Matthews show, mostly because I knew people that were really into it. And it's fun to get high.
What's a jam band?
A jam band would be in the vein of like the Grateful Dead or Fish or Dave Matthews Band,
Dave
where it's like
So these are kind of like ambiance type, like concert.
it basically
bands.
means that like
Stoner.
yes, so it is primarily known for people who are really high because they really are into these musicians that will not do the song in the way that it's on the concert, right? Like Taylor Swift is going around the world selling out arenas, and she plays the song by and large like you'd hear on the album. Maybe a little bit of filigree. The jam band is noted for having 20-minute guitar solos.
Yeah.
Like, it'll just go off into this, like...
Yep. I went to a Grateful Dead concert a few years ago, which, by the way, the most lovely people. The Grateful Dead concert goers were lovely, kind, warm people.
Yeah.
I really liked them.
Yeah.
The music itself, I was like, this is 4 hours of transitions to other songs.
Yes.
Like normally the stuff that the bridge that you would play when you're going to a real song, it was 4 hours of that. 4 hours of the ligaments between songs. Like all ligaments. That's what you could call it. All ligaments.
One time we were going to see a Fish show, and me and my buddy Tito rolled up a bunch of joints that I hid in my hat.
Smart. They never checked the hat.
Nope. We walked in, and I just lifted my hat. I doffed my cap at security, and then we just slowly removed joints that had now been wetted by my brow sweat from the Miami afternoon.
I'm surprised you got him in a hat. Like, that's pretty ballsy.
They're not exactly stringent.
This was a Fish
depends on where
concert?
you
It was a
And
Fish
they
concert
were looking for marijuana?
Well,
Apparently
no,
not
I think
well.
they were looking for.
They probably just hired
other
some nephews to be
things.
like, listen, you're going to be quote-unquote security guard.
Basically,
this is
it's
how I'm
like-
doing a favor to your mom. Just make sure nobody has a gun.
You're allowed to smoke weed in the way that men in the 1950s were allowed to cheat on their wives. Like, just keep it out of people's faces, and everything's gonna be fine. So, with the weed, like I've had friends that like got their like pipe stolen because they were like leaning over the front of the barrier and like smoking it and blowing the smoke in the security guard's face, and eventually they're like, "Hey, fuck you, trust funder," and then just grab the pipe. But otherwise, it is what it is.
By the way, that would be a great name for a book or a band. Hey, fuck you, trust funder.
Fuck you, trust funder.
Fuck you, trust funder. I would go see them.
Sure.
Austin, Texas. I'm Justin Robert Young.
I'm Jen Briney.
I'm Andrew Heaton.
And we're not wrong. On this edition of the program, we're going to talk about free speech, anti-Semitism, and Ivy League institutions. And then we're going to cheer it up by talking about suicide. We're going to do a real
Just
toe
in time
tap
for the
here.
holidays.
Just in time.
It's actually when most people off themselves, apparently.
Yeah.
Holidays.
We can...
Man, Arbor Day is just, you know.
Eden, can you adjust your mic back so it's not falling over? There we go. We'll adjust this part. Yeah. So are you guys getting into the holiday spirit? Is this going well for you guys, the holidays so far?
I feel like I need Congress to go home and then I can start to holiday. But right now it's still madness and I'm still watching it every day and it feels like I'm still at work. So,
Hunter ghosted him today.
well, I heard he went only to the Senate. So he showed up, but he refused
Oh,
to
man,
step
this got to
foot in
hurt
the
their
house.
feelings.
Yeah.
They were pretty butthurt about it, which I find pretty funny.
Well, yeah, I mean, they knew. It's all at this point a show. Like
all
they
dumb.
knew that Hunter wasn't going to come testify privately, and so now they're going to spike the football on him, and he's going to spike the football on them, and they'll be too busy spiking the football to realize that no one has played the game.
No one cares.
Yeah.
I'm getting into Christmas. I have a quart of eggnog in my refrigerator. I bought a animatronic Christmas Yoda that I put on my porch. And I've spent the last 3 weeks feverishly, frantically, and terrifyingly working on my annual comedy Christmas special. So,
This is the time that you go crazy.
this is the time that I go crazy.
This is the least crazy we're going to see you as we approach the holiday season.
Yeah, this is the, like, you will just see me going on endless walks with an extremely troubled expression on my face. And if you roll your window down and go, what happens? I will go, they'll finally realize I'm a fraud. Like that level of, like, trying to squeeze creativity. Yeah, but we're recording tomorrow, so the evil part is done.
The recording. Oh, the writing.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not where I want it to be, but it's going to have to be done. So there we go.
Yeah. You want to know what? The spirit of Christmas. You're going to get what I give you.
Yeah.
That's just the reality. Hey, C-SPAN has never been hotter. We'll play the clip. That was the scene last week during a House hearing about anti-Semitism on college campus. It featured the university presidents of Harvard, MIT, and Penn, and now has resulted in the firing of one of them, Liz McGill of Penn. McGill's firing came after alumni and politicians, including Democratic Governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, harshly condemned her answer. Harvard announced this week that the push to oust Dr. Claudine Gay from her post would not succeed. She will remain where she was after apologizing for her statement. The moment and subsequent fallout has created a new front in the ongoing conversation about free speech on college campuses and how to balance it with the safety of the student body. Jen,
Yes.
did McGill deserve to lose her job?
So that's just not what I'm concerned about. Like, it's a private university. They were clearly not happy with the way she performed in Congress, and I don't know what the performance issues were before this. I don't know if she deserved to lose her job. My bigger concern is the hearing taking place to begin with, and this wasn't the first hearing on anti-Semitism on college campuses that has happened in the last month. Yeah, so since
October 7th.
Since November 7th, there
Okay.
have been 3 because I
Took
went
them
down
a
a
month to
rabbit
spin 'em
hole.
up. Yeah.
I went down a rabbit hole last night and looked at all the different hearings that have happened, and we've actually had 3 hearings on anti-Semitism on college campuses, which I am seeing as an effort to get college administrators, so the heads of colleges, to do what the government is not allowed to do and punish students for protesting Israel's actions in Gaza. Because, the First Amendment says that the government can't do it directly. And in so many instances, we've seen this happen before. The government can't spy on us directly. And so they get the private corporations to spy on us. And then they say, hey, give us a back door. We've seen this happen before. And that's what I'm seeing with this effort to crack down on anti-Semitism on campus, which even in that clip that we just played, which is the one that went super viral, what's being branded as anti-Semitism in a lot of cases isn't, especially in this Congress. So like we heard Elise Stefanik say that she says is calling for the genocide of Jews harassment on your campus. And the administrator says, well, we haven't heard anyone calling for the genocide of Jews. And she's like, but you've heard intifada, right? Those are not synonymous. Intifada is a word that means uprising. It means rebellion. It is not the same as genocide of Jews. We've seen the only Palestinian in this Congress, Rashida Tlaib, be censured for saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It is if you take it literally, that means freedom for Palestinians. This does not equal genocide of the Jews. And then we just saw this Congress pass a resolution, this passed, that says that anti-Zionism, so being anti the idea that there is one religious group that is entitled to this land and can take it by force if necessary, being anti that is the same as anti-Semitism. This Congress has shown such indifference to the plight of Palestinians. Like even on the hearings, I looked, and the reason I started on November 7th is I wanted to see how many hearings they've had on the plight of the Palestinians. And so I started looking on November 7th, figuring by that time, there were 5 times as many deaths in Gaza as there were on October 7th. At that time, there were protests happening all over the world. And so I wanted to see how interested is this Congress in finding out what exactly is the Israeli government trying to do over there? What are we funding over there? Is the two-state solution something the Biden administration is actually pushing for, or actually are they just saying that? These are questions I think are important. How many hearings have they had on that? 0. How many hearings have they had on anti-Semitism? 5. So it's like, I'm seeing these protests happen for good reason, because we are seeing a shameful indifference to the slaughter, the annihilation of Gaza is what I think we're witnessing right now. Because if you just look at the damage that's been done, we all know that they've been bombing hospitals. They blew up the parliament building. So the institutions of government, if there were a two-state solution, if there was going to be a country called Palestine, they've reduced the parliament to rubble. Schools are gone, including UN schools. These are not schools run by Hamas. The resorts that are on the beach in Gaza, you can't tell me there's tunnels under these resorts on the beach. Why have those been flattened? And even farms. We now know that 25% of the farmland has been bulldozed. Are you going to tell me that the olives are now Hamas too? So they're making Gaza uninhabitable. And when you look at the rhetoric from the government, they're saying that the Arab countries should take in all the refugees. Well, we've seen this before in Israel's history, where they say these other countries should take the refugees, then they never let them come back. And my fear is that 10 years from now, Israel just has beachfront property. I think we are witnessing the annihilation of Gaza. I think we are watching them making it uninhabitable on purpose. And these are questions just that aren't being asked. And every single day we're seeing people, I mean, it's the equivalent of them having an Oklahoma City bombing, because that's what they're doing. They're taking out entire apartment complexes. They're taking out, people that are just sleeping in their beds because there's someone that could be branded as Hamas in the same building. They take out the entire building. When we had the Oklahoma City bombing, that was so tragic for us Americans. It's happening every day in Gaza. 60 out of the last 67 days that is happening in Gaza. And yet our Congress is focusing on hurt feelings on college campuses. And I do think that the goal of all of it is to shut down protests and to get private administrators to be afraid for their jobs so that they'll do the dirty work for this Congress, because this Congress has shown no empathy for the Gazan people whatsoever. And so, big picture, did this lady deserve to lose her job? I think it's the message that we have to be concerned about. The fact that she did feel the need to resign. The fact that the head of Harvard has this target on her back. They have this, they've gone back to a dissertation that she wrote 1 million years ago and are now saying, well, she should be fired because of plagiarism. Like, okay. Like, they're going after these people.
That was Chris Rufo that was doing that, and he obviously is a motivated actor in that regard.
But it's been a whole week of this storyline.
What would you say is the motivation of Josh Shapiro then, the Democratic governor of Pennsylvania who called for her firing?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know what their motivations are. I think there is a concerted effort by people that want to shut down the protests. I think this is the way that they are trying to do it. Because if you look at even the Stefanik clip, the implications, if these college administrators had said, saying these things equals harassment. Well, if you take that to its next step, that means that saying things in a protest, therefore, would warrant punishment of these students. Because I think that is ultimately what is being demanded here, punishment of the students. And so the pile on of those clips, I don't know the feelings that these individuals are happening. Like, I didn't even know Josh Shapiro said that. But what I'm just witnessing, big picture, is there are some people that want these protests shut down, and there are some people that are watching that clip and getting upset about it. Like, that's how this works, where you think you're defending the Jewish people. But I think the overall effort, the fact that this hearing even took place and that there were 2 more just like it, I think this is an effort to make protesting on behalf of Palestinians a scary thing to do for your own personal job security, reputation, etc.
Heaton?
Jen is thinking a lot more big picture than I am, and a lot more internationally than I am. I haven't really considered this in terms of foreign policy ramifications. My quick synopsis is I didn't particularly like anybody in the clips. I never like congressmen or congresswomen in these clips where they drag some poor bastard in front of a camera and ask them, when did you stop beating your wife? Because that's always what these are. They're all like my cynical take is that the members of Congress that are doing this are looking for viral videos and clips that they can send to their constituents and fundraisers, and also, I think accurately, see an opportunity to drive a wedge issue into the Democratic coalition, separating Jewish voters from woke people, and they see that as very politically advantageous. So that from where I'm at, is probably the main congressional motivation. But then on the flip side, and again, there's no way to make me more sympathetic to somebody than to have a bunch of bloviating congressmen yell at them on camera in order to get viral clips for their campaign.
Yeah.
So I'm watching this going, okay, I'm already instinctively on the side of the presidents. I think that the university presidents were over-lawyered but correct in what they were saying, but hypocrites in a broader view. So what they were correct in saying is, look, hate speech is protected speech. As Jen pointed out, these are private universities, which means they are not required to do the same level of First Amendment scrutiny that you would have at like a community college or University of Oklahoma or something like that. But nonetheless, they've modeled their alleged speech codes off of the U.S. Constitution, and you're allowed to say heinous things. What they kept bringing up was you're not allowed to target individuals. At that point, it becomes harassment. You're not allowed to incite violence. You can't pull down other people's posters. You can't do heckler's veto. There's a difference between harassing or inciting violence, which are not protected speech, versus saying something odious, which is protected speech. Hate speech is protected speech, right? They were correct in doing that. However, they did it in a very, very slick, clearly they'd been coached by an attorney with specific lines kind of way.
The same attorney.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that because
all 3 had the same attorney.
All 3 had the same prep.
Congresswoman,
that makes sense because they were saying the same things, like word for word.
Yes, Congresswoman, it is context dependent, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, they came off rather inhuman in that way. The bit where I broaden my view here is they're full of shit. And what I mean by that is that where the hell were they, I don't know, a year ago or any time in the last 15 years and giving a shit about free speech on campus? Like Harvard has the worst score of any university in the country in terms of free speech. FIRE, the freedom, I can't remember what it stands for.
Individual rights and expression.
Thank you. Freedom of individual rights and expression, which is kind of the ACLU, old school ACLU equivalent of free speech on campuses, has marked down Harvard for like a decade. Is like literally the last the worst university in America for speech codes, followed by the University of Pennsylvania, which is the lady who lost her job this week, McGill. We're talking about places that have like borderline Maoist speech codes where I can secretly report you to the bloated administration because I don't like how you said my pronoun, or you asked me where I'm from and I took umbrage with that because it's a microaggression. So there's all of these things going on. And
you will never know your accuser.
You will not know your
accuser.
accuser.
Will not have any kind of recompense toward your penalty.
Like universities that have within living memory had free speech zones where if you wanted to talk about something, you had to go to like a chalk outline in one quadrant of the school. These are not places that enshrine free
like
speech.
international waters for edgelords.
Yes. So them saying like, look, this is free speech, it's protected speech. The university should be a clearinghouse of ideas rather than a protagonist in the fight. That is all accurate and true, but not what the universities are doing. And so where I come in is they are being hypocrites. The way to solve this, from my viewpoint, is almost in all instances like this is more speech. Have universities actually be what they are purporting to be, which is arenas of ideas and things like that. The way to not handle this is for conservatives who rightly see universities as openly hostile to conservatives and actively punishing anybody that expresses which is accurate and with these elite institutions, and they should be mad. The way to deal with that is not to go, well, we'll just have our politicians wield the same stick at you. We'll figure out how to hit you guys up on it. So, in short, the members of Congress were bloviating, self-serving politicians.
Yeah.
The presidents of the universities are hypocrites, and we ought to actually care about free speech rather than weaponizing it to punish our enemies when it suits us.
And that's why these happened. These hearings happen. I totally agree with you, Heaton, that this was, in fact, I would say the reason why it happened is because these politicians found themselves in a situation where they could beat on boogeymen from their side. These presidents of universities that have gone too far for reasons that you can fill up plenty of Glenn Beck show, topics or Ben Shapiro topics. This is a well-known thing. I disagree with you, Jen, in that I think that this is a chilling element for Palestinian protests, because for any of those Republicans on that panel, they would love if those protests continued to go on forever and even louder, because it is tearing apart the Democratic coalition, and they love it when they hear Democrats fighting with each other and talking about how they're not going to vote for Joe Biden in 2024.
Even the clip that we played was, it was implying that the protests that are happening are calling for the genocide of Jews because they're saying the word intifada. That's directly...
Because they want those presidents to play by the rules that Republicans feel those presidents have made conservative causes play by. And say, okay, well, you're not going to be admitted because you posted something online, or that we're going to take your words out of context and we're going to make you into something worse than you are. We're going to punish you for it. That's why, in my opinion, those questions were phrased like that.
But those same people, those same conservatives in this instance are saying these students should be punished. They're saying this thing, which, by the way, there's no evidence anyone was saying, but they're saying this thing. Don't you think that is harassment and intimidation and therefore deserves to be punished? In this case, they're the ones that are not pushing for free speech. So all of them being like, oh, these colleges are so woke and they don't let us say what we want to. Like, they've flipped the script on this.
Their point is that the colleges they don't actually have principles on free speech, that they are terrified of their student base. And this is my editorializing, because their student base is the source of their money, because colleges and universities are in league with the banks in a closed cartel to liquidate and put all these students into tremendous financial hardship for degrees that are increasingly worthless. But that means that the administrators are terrified of their student base. And so the ever more progressive student base that says, okay, well, now Ben Shapiro can't speak on campus because words are actual violence. They want the conservative element that put on that hearing wants those university presidents to play by those rules, that if words are actual violence for a conservative speaker on campus, and that's the reason why they need to get canceled, or somebody that brings them up or supports them is doing actual harm to the other student body, to other people in their student body, then why isn't, regardless of how we want to parse whether or not intifada or from the river to the sea is actual hate speech. I don't think that it's arguable that it hasn't been used as hate speech, specifically in the Middle East. The phrase "push the Jews into the sea" and intifada, which has been the description of what has not been theorized, but has happened in Israel multiple times, to the point where you call them the first, second, and third intifada, which is the targeted killing of Jews. But I'm with you. I'm with
you. Is it the targeted killing of Jews or the targeted killing of Israelis? Because those are not the same thing, and the Israelis are the ones that are preventing
in Hamas's
Palestine
words,
from being a country.
In the words of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, Jews.
There's also the Palestinian Authority, so it's like I think that.
But the people carrying out the intifadas were killing Jews.
But to say that the word intifada means genocide of Jews,
I'm not saying that.
Just inaccurate. And
well,
that's what you didn't say that.
It can.
Stefanik said that. But
it can mean that. It has meant that.
You can twist all kinds of things. But right now there's a lot of things that are
their phrasing.
If
there's a lot being twisted to be anti-Semitism.
I'm going to be a uniter, not a divider for a moment, because I don't think that you're necessarily disagreeing here. So, Jen, you're describing I think a common phenomenon on universities that we should all take umbrage with, which is how do I disqualify an idea I don't like by doing offense archaeology enough that I can hang racism on it? And now everybody has to go, oh, it's racist. Okay, like that guy likes the Electoral College. Let's all figure out that some slave owner liked the Electoral College at some point, so it's racist. You can't like the Electoral College now. If you like the Electoral College, you're racist, right? That same phenomenon, and I appreciate your viewpoint. I don't know the etymology of the phrase "from the river to the sea." I could see it being used either way. I think it's ambiguous. Justin, I think what you're saying is if there is, words are violent and not words, or alternately, if they're ambiguous, there ought to be a uniform application of how we approach them on college campuses, rather than picking and choosing in a given situation where it's ambiguous and it's conservative, therefore it's evil and needs to be suppressed. It's ambiguous and it's anti-Israel. Well, it's ambiguous. We got to take a back seat on this one, right? Like, it seems to me you're pushing more of the universality of rules here.
I'm not even necessarily pushing for it. My opinions on universities are far more draconian and harsh. I believe that they should have their endowments liquidated, and I think that they are as much for the reason we're going to get to in our next topic about how dim youth looks at in the world and how much they feel that the world is hopeless. And I think that part of the blood on the hands of the people that have done it are in universities that have put students behind with degrees and a diluted employment network that has left them in those positions. I think that there is tremendous harm that has been done by universities that go beyond anything about free speech. But my explanation for why that happened is because I know it's a hobby horse on the right to say, look at how ridiculous these free speech things are on university campuses, and how many people have been driven out of their jobs or expelled or punished for doing things that should not exist in a place that protects free speech. And now they found a situation where it was very, very, very uncomfortable for these specific people to defend something, and they made them pay. Elise Stefanik made them pay, and that's why this went viral.
I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I have a question for you. Do you think that if the situation in Israel and Palestine wasn't happening right now, that there would be 5 hearings in the last month on anti-Semitism, 3 of which were about anti-Semitism on college campuses? Do you not think those are related?
No, but I also don't think that we would be seeing what I have just crossed my plane of view, troubling examples of anti-Semitism that have gone viral recently. So I do think that they are connected. I think that that October 7th and the IDF's response to it has certainly kicked up a lot of stuff. And one of the things that's been kicked up is anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
I mean, for as much as we want to talk about the American version of this conversation, let's understand that there's no ambiguity for what Hamas's aims are. They want to kill Jews.
Because they're Jews or because they're Israelis who are preventing them from having a country?
The first is the root, and the second is the symptom.
I don't know about that. I don't know about
this
that.
This is just them. Like you can look up what Hamas says.
You know, I also have a problem with us just talking about Hamas as if it's, Hamas. Like, anything they want to bomb, it's Hamas. And any idea that you find reprehensible, like, that's what Hamas thinks. Like, Hamas has become this boogeyman that is justifying the mass slaughter of a caged population. And I'm getting a little tired of it.
They're a real organization. I mean, I know for a lot of people, they're just tuning in. But for anybody who's followed, the situation in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, these are not things that just popped up.
I know it's a real organization, but it's not a real military. It's not a real government, which is at the heart of this entire issue. If you want to get the leaders of Hamas, they're hanging out in Qatar, having conversations with elites. Like, they're not even in Gaza. And I've seen all kinds of different estimates for how many Hamas there are in Gaza, ranging from 30,000. So with the current death toll being 19,000, that means we still have at least 11,000 more to go. 30,000 or 600,000 is what I saw on the BBC back in October. And if you do the math there's 2 million people in Gaza. Half of them are children, which means that there's 1 million adults. So 600,000 Hamas equals every adult male in Gaza. Like, at some point, I think we need to define Hamas, because at this point, watching the way that they are destroying all the infrastructure of Gaza, making it uninhabitable for not just Hamas, but anyone who wants to govern after. Like, how do you govern when you have no power plants, no food sources, no income available to you because there's a complete blockade of your country? Like, this isn't just destroying Hamas. They are destroying Gaza. And there is a difference there.
Oh, okay. I don't see your question.
I just think that that's what matters here. For an entire week, we've been watching our country have this conversation about anti-Semitism in America, which is real. Someone I love very much had their synagogue vandalized. I know it's real. It pisses me off. And I think a lot of what's happening right now, the way that our country is showing, or our Congress at least, is showing no empathy whatsoever towards Gaza, I actually think it makes my Jewish friends and family members less safe, equating all kinds of things with anti-Semitism. When actual anti-Semitism happens, it kind of dilutes the entire word. So, just so watching this national conversation now, which has gone on for 6 days, when in all of these 6 days, there are hundreds of people being killed in Gaza. I wish our country would focus on that first, because the immediate danger right now is to those hundreds of people who are dying every single day in Gaza, to those children in Gaza who are being operated on hospital floors by the light of camera phones with no anesthesia. I care about these human beings. And so the fact that our country, which is complicit in these bombings, do you know that Joe Biden sent 14,000 more tank shells to Israel last week, circumventing our Congress? So even our Congress isn't standing up for their own power to have a part in these decisions. This is just happening. And so maybe up until last week, you could say, well, yeah, America, they armed Israel before, but since the slaughter, they haven't sent any more. Well, Joe Biden, in our names, just sent more shells to do this. Where's the national conversation about our complicity in that? Instead, we're talking about college campuses. It's certainly happening
in progressive circles. Like, the question is exactly how much control do we have over the situation, and I think it's vastly overstated on the progressive left how much control we have over it.
We just set 14,000 more bombs. We have control over whether or not we do that.
No, I don't believe that. I think that the IDF is. I mean, look, they're happy to have the reinforcements, but the IDF and the current government, even if Joe Biden loudly called for a ceasefire today and did it every single day at 8 o'clock every morning, I don't believe that would materially stop their operation in Gaza.
That's precisely my point. This is the 12th largest arms exporting country in the world. Israel doesn't need our 14,000 bombs. He chose to make us complicit in this. That was a choice. We didn't have to send those bombs. But instead of us seeing every single day headlines about those 14,000 bombs, about the circumvention of Congress, that is not the headline. The headline is, will the president of Harvard be fired or not? Like, we are not paying attention, I think, adequately enough to the role we could play in this, to the role we are playing in this. And instead we're being distracted.
What should we do?
I mean, I would really like for Congress to stand up for themselves in their role in making decisions on war and peace, because Biden just completely went around them. So even if you don't agree with me that the bombing of a caged population should stop immediately, I do think that members of Congress should be standing up for their own power. I also think members of Congress should be having any hearings whatsoever on what's going on in Gaza. What is the actual goal here? Because we're being told by the Biden administration as recently as this morning that the only thing that's acceptable to them is the eventual goal of a two-state solution, which is code for there is an Israel and there is a Palestine, two different countries sharing the same area. That is what the Biden administration says is the goal. Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel is saying he's not going to let that happen. So what in the hell are we supporting here? What is the goal here? Is there no interest in this Congress in having that conversation?
The Netanyahu position is yes, but, which has been the situation in Israel, depending on who has been in charge for my entire lifetime. The closest that we've gotten to a two-state solution was Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat in the waning days of Bill Clinton's term, and Bill Clinton, for anybody that will listen past that, says that it was Yasser Arafat that dragged his feet and rejected a two-state solution.
Which is, there's a lot of different interpretations of that. I just look at the numbers, which is in the West Bank, there are now twice as many settlers there than there were during that time when that was supposed to be Palestinian land.
And Benjamin Netanyahu is tremendously unpopular in Israel because of it.
He is, and that's why I am so concerned about this.
And he might be going to jail if he ever leaves office.
Exactly. So here you have a Zionist prime minister who is going to lose his power. This is his last great act on behalf of Zionism. Is his last great act getting rid of Hamas or getting rid of Gaza? And I would just like for our Congress to be having those conversations. And instead, we're seeing 5 hearings about anti-Semitism, which is real, but we're having 0 hearings about that.
And look, we're all amateur international relations experts on this show, so I don't think anybody's opinion should be taken particularly seriously. But I think even the most dovish prime minister after what happened on October 7th would be operating a similar military exercise right now.
We've never seen anything like what's happening. I mean, there are so many international organizations who are operating in war zones all over the world that are saying this is the worst they've ever seen it. So I don't think that this is just, this is a typical war.
I'm not saying it's a typical war. I'm saying it's horrifying. I'm saying it's one of the most brutal, ugly things that has ever happened in that region. And I don't think that it would be materially different with somebody that wasn't Netanyahu.
Which is
At least that's my opinion.
But the question is, this whole segment is about this hearing that happened in Congress and the repercussions of it. And there are no hearings happening about what's happening in Gaza and the repercussions of it. And so that is where I'm getting upset, where this country is being, I think there's a look over here happening, because every time you talk about Gaza, it's like, well, anti-Semitism is real. It's like, yes, but there's people dying every day. So let's take care of the dying, and then we can take care of the hurt feelings. Because there is a difference between what is happening in Gaza and what is happening on college campuses. One is actual lives being destroyed every minute we're having this conversation.
One is also happening in America, and the other's not.
But
in a place we can't control.
How many people have died in the last 5 weeks in America because of anti-Semitism?
I do not know that statistic, nor do I believe you do.
Well, I can guarantee you it's less than 9,000, which is the number of people in Gaza who have been killed.
I agree. They are in an active hot war.
Yeah.
Yes.
So maybe our Congress should be more interested in that. That is where my fire rages right now in this topic.
You are largely saying that this is there to spark anger, and what you would like is more anger sparked in favor of the plight of the Palestinian people.
I would like any semblance of balance in this Congress. Because everything we've seen, from the censure of Rashida Tlaib to the resolution saying that anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are the same thing, to these hearings, it is all Israel's side. No one has any empathy for Gaza in this Congress, and I think it's horrible. And I'm concerned about it. Because they're making decisions and doing things on our behalf on the world stage that are going to come back to bite us. They're already seeing a huge increase on attacks on our military bases overseas. This will come back to bite us. This is happening in our names, and I would like for our Congress to at least consider the plight of the people dying on the other side with bombs that we're paying for.
Heaton? You've been suspiciously quiet.
Okay, I am not paying a tremendous amount of, I'm not paying a huge amount of active attention to Israel-Gaza, so I don't have much to contribute there, which is
You don't have any material in the Christmas special?
I don't have any. I have assiduously avoided that. There have been several sketches that I've had to go, that's almost too close. Okay, we'll get rid of that one.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot to contribute on that. I don't think I disagree with the broad strokes of Congress is focusing on things that are grabby and beneficial to individual congressmen's career rather than the big picture. I don't disagree with that. Or that its priorities are misplaced. Yep, I think that's pretty standard actually. And having our legislature paying attention to the nuance of a conflict rather than cheerleading for one side unambiguously. Yeah, I also broadly agree with that. But when it comes to the interplay between Palestine and Israel, I don't have those stats in front of me. I don't have the details. So unfortunately, I can't
just
really...
take a step.
Yeah.
What could go wrong? It's like half of Twitter.
Yeah.
People just LARPing.
Alan Dershowitz was supposed to come on my show last week, and he canceled on me last minute. And I was going to interview him about his book, his forthcoming book, The War Against the Jews, Why Hamas Must Be Destroyed. I think I got the subtitle right. And would love to interview him and get back to you.
To be continued.
To be continued, yeah.
Well, I don't think that he would be saying anything that would do anything but inflame Jen.
You know what I can say? I think having read his book, I could parrot him for a minute. What Dershowitz would say is that, again, this is Alan Dershowitz, all right? Mm-hmm. What he would say...
Who was on the Epstein plane, in case you don't agree with him.
Who was, yeah.
But standing up for Jews if you do agree with him.
Yeah, exactly. Alan Dershowitz would say that Hamas's specific aim in its charter is to preclude a two-state solution. That Hamas does not want there to be an Israel. It wants Israel to cease to exist as a state. That there cannot be a two-state solution while Hamas exists, because it is an active, willful antagonist towards such an aim happening. That Hamas is not just the enemy of Israel, but the enemy of the Palestinian people. That their suffering is largely coming from Hamas, which is a oppressive and non-democratic regime that controls the West Bank.
Gaza.
Excuse me. Thank you. Gaza. Thank you. And that Israel is not only justified but existentially necessitated to do regime change with Hamas. Otherwise, there will be an openly antagonistic and existential threat funded by Iran and other anti-Israel countries. And so his position would be that Hamas is all of those things. That it is juxtaposed towards an eventual two-state solution and peace, and peace cannot happen so long as Hamas continues to persist.
Well, and I don't disagree with a word of that. The thing is, we need to define Hamas. Is Hamas the leadership, or is Hamas 30,000 people, all of whom need to die? Like, that is the question here. Like, what does it mean to eradicate Hamas? Because with the amount of people who are dying, it sounds more like the 30,000 people need to die. And what exactly is their role in Hamas? Like, how are they deciding who gets targeted and who doesn't? Like, these are not even questions being asked. So that's my concern. Like, is Hamas, for Israel's sake, who you want bordering your country? Like, absolutely not. And I get that. But what is the goal here? Again, eradication of Hamas, I need a few more details on what that means.
And you were supposing that the Israeli war against Hamas is a smokescreen for liquidating the West Bank. That it is
Gaza.
really just...
Gaza.
Why do I keep saying that? Thank you. Because it's on...
That's the most dangerous thing we could talk about.
Yeah. But basically, this is an excuse to liquidate Gaza.
That is my fear.
Okay.
Because that, I mean, we seem to forget that before October 7th, Benjamin Netanyahu went to the United Nations and held up a map, calling it the New Israel, and the West Bank and Gaza weren't on it. And the world was furious about this. So Zionism, I mean, so what pisses me off is I'm going to be accused of being anti-Semitic, even though I love the Jewish community. I have been to so many Jewish ceremonies, and I have been welcomed
Couple brisses?
so many times. I've never done a bris. Yeah. Those I avoid.
I love doing the hora at weddings. Love it.
It's a good time.
Yeah, like I love the community. I love the traditions. I love how spirited the debates are. Like, I love the Jewish community. It's not that. But like Israel, the Zionism part of what Israel is, that there is a group of people that because of their religion are considered to be above everyone else. I mean, it really looks a lot like our shameful history and what we did to the Native Americans and black people and, I'm seeing a lot of shadows in that. But the idea that one ethnic group is chosen and the other one should just find somewhere else to live. I can be against that idea. I can be against official government segregation and still love the Jewish community. That is at the heart of both
sides of this particular conflict.
What do you mean by that?
Hamas's goal is to have the Jews be eradicated and leave.
Again, Hamas does not speak for every Arab. Hamas does not speak for every Palestinian person. Because they haven't allowed an election
since they came into power.
Well, there's that too. So it's like you're eradicating 30,000 Hamas. Again, are you counting people that voted 18 years ago as Hamas? Like, how are you making the list?
My only point here is not to justify anything that the IDF has done, because to be totally honest with you, I don't seem to be as familiar with the ins and outs of their daily activity as you are. But I do know that the reality on the ground between Hamas and the IDF is that one of y'all's got to go. That's where they fight. That's how they fight right now. Those are the lines that they are fighting on. And in many cases, I think that they are stark racial and religious lines that they are fighting on.
Is absolutely true.
And
we're in complete agreement about that.
I think where we get into trouble is when we take what is a different way of looking at the world that exists in the Middle East and we try to export it to our Western mindset, and we find grievances that we feel are compatible to those situations. It's not to say that I don't think that they exist or that it makes you wrong for thinking it, but for my money, it's not a one-for-one transfer. And we owe it to understand this conflict to, at the very least, take Hamas seriously when they say things out loud like, we need to kill every Jew.
Which I understand, but at this point, military has the overwhelming firepower. We're talking about a nuclear power here.
The IDF.
Yeah, Israel. Yeah. The government of Israel is the power that has the power to make Gaza and the West Bank not exist should they choose to. Hamas doesn't have that power. They have rockets that they smuggle in tunnels. They do not have a navy. They do not have an army. They do not have an air force. So when you're looking at like, well, they say they want to kill all the Jews, they can't. Israel can kill all the Palestinians. And the question now is not whether or not Israel has a right to exist. It's whether or not Palestine has a right to exist. Because right now it doesn't. And we're watching one piece of Palestine being turned into rubble.
So if we cease fire now, then Hamas remains in control of Gaza, right?
So
Are we in agreement on that?
I don't know. I'm not even calling for ceasefire now because I really don't even know what that slogan means. I think there is a way, if you're trying to regime change a place, to do it without flattening the entire population, without taking out all their schools and their hospitals and their farmland and everything that allows the population to subsist. I think that with the surveillance that we know Israel has all over Gaza, they could do a much more targeted operation, which our own State Department has been saying. But instead, they say there's a Hamas person in an apartment building, they take the whole building and blow it up. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that this is not targeted. They're not looking to just change the leadership based on their actions. And every day this bombing continues. So what I would like to see is, if you're really trying to regime change, like, be more targeted about it and let us know what exactly you're trying to do after. So let's say Hamas is gone. Now you have a whole bunch of people whose parents have been killed, their brothers, their sisters, their best friends. They're in physical pain because they've been operated on with no anesthesia and now it's getting infected. There are a whole new generation of people that are being raised to think that the Israelis are horrible. And so once
that was happening before too.
Well, I know, but once you get rid of Hamas, like, is Hamas kind of like V for Vendetta, that it's an idea that is just being created and made bigger by this level of violence? Like, when you get rid of Hamas, what comes the next day? Is Israel going to take over Gaza?
The Palestinian Authority coming in on a Israeli tank from the West Bank to set up a government in Gaza is the general gist of it.
Well, that doesn't seem to be...
And they say they don't want to do it. But,
exactly, that's a problem.
Welcome into,
They This is why I think hearings about taking it full circle. This is why I think hearings about what the goal is, what exactly we are supporting, is so needed right now. Because these questions are not being asked and answered publicly, and they need to be.
I got a follow-up question.
Okay.
Again, this is me channeling Alan Dershowitz, whose book I just read, apparently needlessly.
He's not bitter at all.
I woke up at 6:30 to read that book in time to interview that man, and then he went to Florida.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Popular with the Jews.
Dershowitz repeatedly in the book says that Hamas intentionally, as a matter of strategy, builds bunkers and headquarters and things underneath hospitals and civilian targets with the goal of having civilian targets flattened by IDF in order to get good media attention and in order to portray the Israelis as the bad guys. This is an intentional strategic decision on their part to maximize the collateral damage of their own people in order to curry favor with the Palestinian plight. That would be an explanation for why some of these things that look like they're not military are being targeted. Like, what do you reckon?
Well, I would like to see some proof of that, because we had a lot of media attention on a command center that was supposedly underneath Gaza's largest hospital, which even when they brought in New York Times reporters, they couldn't show it to them. And so there's been no proof of that whatsoever. And then also just looking...
In this incursion or ever?
I know there are tunnels. And Israel knows there are tunnels because apparently Israel built the tunnels. And yes, they're flooding them. I think if the IDF actually gave a hot damn about the people of Gaza, they would have their brave soldiers physically go into the tunnels and hunt the people instead of blowing up entire buildings. We've also seen, though, places where there physically can't be tunnels. So the resorts, the tourism industry that Gaza used to have, those resorts are now completely flattened. I've dug holes on the beach, and I can tell you they flood real quick. So there's no tunnels underneath those resorts. And the farmland, why did they bulldoze the greenhouses? Why did they bulldoze the farmland? Like,
so you're saying that is proof to you that the IDF is extracurricular beyond the stated mission to eliminate Hamas, and they are intentionally inflicting death and pain on the people of Gaza?
My fear in this situation is that Gaza's infrastructure is being so badly damaged that when this war is over, no one will be able to live there because there will be no hospitals, no schools, no power plants, no farmland, like nothing able to be used. And then Israel will be able to say, for the good of the Gazan people, Egypt, open your doors. And there will be so much suffering and so many infections and so many people that can't eat that the world will pressure the neighbors to take these Arabs in, and they'll never be allowed to go home.
They don't want to take them in.
No, they don't want to take them in because in 1948, this is exactly what happened. People were pushed out of the homes expecting to go home after the war. They were never allowed to return. We had a whole bunch of protests that was called the Right to Return, and it was a peaceful protest. The Israeli soldiers killed hundreds of people and shot a bunch more in the legs. So peaceful protest hasn't worked for this situation. But we've even seen people in the Israeli government say that this is the second Nakba. 1948 is what is referred to as the Nakba. Kicking people out of their homes and never allowing them to return. So taking that history and knowing that history and watching what's happening now and watching the Arab neighbors being told that you're monsters for not accepting these refugees, you can see how this could play out. You just never let them back in, and Gaza is gone.
There's regional conflicts that prevent them from taking, that go beyond Israel, that are about Egypt and the Palestinian people and the neighboring states that tend to have revolutions when you let in a lot of Palestinian refugees.
Absolutely. But I do see a path here to where these Zionists in this Zionist government could make it so that Gaza doesn't exist.
Intentionally killing Gazans so they can seize their land. That is your position.
That is my fear.
Okay.
Do you think that's an unreasonable fear based on the history?
I think it's a very, very ugly situation, like many things in the Middle East. And I think over-indexing on that idea is not something I would do. But that's just me.
Well, this is, again, I'm going to end this where I started this. I feel like this is a conversation that Congress should be a part of. I feel like my fears are shared by people that are knowledgeable about the situation. I feel like there are plenty of people in Congress that could voice the Israeli opinion. I feel like debates should be had before we send $14 billion more and we allow our president without Congress to send more bombs. I think our Congress should be involved in this and taking the Palestinian perspective into account. And right now, I have seen none of that.
Patreon.com/We're Not Wrong. Please continue to support us.
I know.
However
I just fucked our whole show.
You are, wherever you are on this ideological spectrum, we want money. Patreon.com/We're Not Wrong is where you need to go. This week, we're going to talk about, because this is a real upper of an episode.
I was about to say, I kind of got bummed out there. Can we say something fun now? Can we have a fun conversation,
only
Justin?
on Patreon. Only on Patreon are we going to be talking about the Virginia candidate whose sex live stream cost her an election. She's in the press speaking about that and many other things.
And spoiler alert, Justin put some quotes in here that I think he's excited to read.
You'll have to pay to hear. Patreon.com/We're Not Wrong. Why did I do this 1 second? I should have put the sex one in the main show. But then
we
our
still
Patreon,
have time.
No, but then our Patreon would be about suicide.
They'd have suicide.
No one
yeah,
wants to
yeah,
pay for
that's
suicide.
True. Yeah.
You know, I actually have some positive thoughts on suicide, so I don't think it's going to be quite the downer that you
Don't
would
worry,
expect.
folks. It'll be a real knee slapper. The U.S. suicide rate has reached an 80-year high in 2022. Nearly 50,000 Americans killed themselves, according to provisional data from the National Center for Health Statistics. The rate of 14.3 suicides per 100,000 people is the highest it's been since 1941. There have been periodic spikes in U.S. suicide rate dating more than a century, with peaks during World War I, the Great Depression, and the Great Recession. Deaths among younger people, defined as people 25 and under, have declined from 2021. Suicides among older people, people older than 35, have risen. Men tend to have higher suicide rates as they age. The most salient rate is men 75 or older, which is nearly 45 deaths per 100,000 people. Non-Hispanic white men tend to have the highest rates of suicide at older ages, said a representative of the NCHS and lead author of the report. The rates among older Americans have begun to decline, but the latest increase in deaths began in 2020. Experts attribute these deaths to the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic, in part because of the losses of social connection, the lack of health access during the pandemic, and the availability of firearms in the United States. Among elderly people, 70% of suicide deaths do involve firearms. Hey, Heaton.
Yeah.
We're both in the money demo. Why are we killing ourselves?
Well, I think it's for all of those reasons you brought up.
Should we be a protected class?
I have long advocated that I personally, Andrew Heaton, should be designated a protected class.
You should be nicer to me. I might kill myself.
Everybody should be
statistically.
Everybody should be nicer. Well, we're not on the threat right now, Justin, according to that data, right? Like the three highest groups age-wise are 75 to 80. No, what is it? 85 plus, 75 to 85, and then 25 to 35. So we're actually in the valley right now. You don't need to worry about us that much if we're going off of the statistics here. You brought up some of the Ds that experts talk about. There's 5 Ds. There's depression. There's deadly firearms or access to deadly firearms. There's I can't remember all of these. I don't remember the acronym, but being disconnected. I think that's the main one. I think that's probably the biggest accelerant right now. It's like kind of like homelessness. There's lots of different ways to get there. I don't think that there's one specific thing that is causing suicide rates to go up. I think there's lots and lots of different things, but the one that I am kind of drawn to, that I keep thinking about on my program and I keep looking at in my life, is just the general disconnectedness and alienation that I think people go through right now. I suspect the reason that older men are such an at-risk group is because of more cultural issues and how they view things. Like the rate of suicide from men to women, I think, is about 4 to 1, if I'm not mistaken. 4 to 1 or 3 to 1. Like, you're way more likely to kill yourself as a guy than as a woman. And I think for a lot of those guys,
they are smarter.
Huh? So you're thinking they just pull it off, or oh no, the women are smart.
They get sad, and then I don't know, they yell at someone anonymously on the internet and move on. Us dullards, we get in our own way.
I suspect that it's feeling deprived of autonomy and meaning. I think that for these older guys, that's probably the thing.
I would agree.
I think. Like, you know what? Actually, when I worked for the House years ago, for the House of Representatives, I was 80% of my job was getting yelled at by old guys. Yeah. And it was old guys that had, this is my interpretation, but I stand by it, old guys who had gleaned the meaning in their life by having a job to do. They were doing a job and they were providing for their family, and that was why they were here. And now their family is gone because they've grown up and they're not doing a job anymore, and they are miserable and they feel useless and they feel a decline in status. And so they would just watch television and scream at interns all day. That was their new thing in life, which was very sad. I strongly disliked them for it, but also I acknowledge that
you were the one getting yelled at.
I was the one getting yelled at by these people. But it was coming from, I think, a deep source of anguish and pain. And that's just the emotional side. You add to that, like, it's much higher, I don't say much, it's higher in rural areas than it is in urban areas. Now, that could be because there's better hospital options and more doctors and things in urban areas. It could be a lack of medical access, but I suspect that it's just the autonomy, that if you're getting older and you're not able to drive, all of a sudden you're cut off and you're now at your house by yourself. I think that those all add up. And then the other thing, which I think afflicts everybody, that I don't think is anything to do with age, but I think it gets much worse as people get older, is the disconnectedness. About 6 months ago, maybe a year ago now, I brought on the director of the it's got a more technical name than this, but I'm going to call it the Harvard Happiness Study. Yeah. So the Harvard Happiness Study is the longest running happiness and life thriving study in history. It started in like 1940, where they would follow a specific group of people around, originally white men who were the only people that counted in 1940. It's now been expanded, but they would talk to them about, how are you doing? Like, what are you enjoying about life? And the findings that they had could be summarized as about 50% of your happiness is under your control. About 10% of it is circumstantial, which is to say that you can't control it, but if the circumstances change, you can get better. And about 40% of it is determined by two things, which are how healthy are you, and do you have meaningful, close friendships? Yeah. The health thing, I think, is probably very relevant with this group of 75 to 85, but for that block of, well, for everybody, because again, when we're talking about these rates here, like I think it's like 14.9 out of 100,000 for people that are 75, whereas it's like 12.1 for everybody. It's not like this is a huge difference from what I can tell statistically. I think the disconnectedness is a huge part of this. In 2000, the last time, or when we, just the most relevant data I've looked at recently, I think the average American spent 6 hours a week with close friends. As of 2020, that's dropped to like 3 hours a week. So there is so insofar as we can look at the data, there's been a really big decline in active, meaningful relationships in life. And I think that is the biggest determinant outside of your health that you can possibly have over whether you're happy or not. And I think that's one of the big things here. Again, there are lots of other things here when you look at the data. Like, it tends to spike during periods of economic instability and economic turmoil. It spikes in World War I, World War II, and then it drops during World War II, and then it comes back in 2008. So there's lots and lots of different things. But the thing I'm looking at is that disconnection.
Jen?
Yeah, I think financial insecurity, I'm glad you said that at the end. I think that has to be a part of it too, especially for the older people, because we know that Social Security hasn't kept up with the rising cost of living. And then I read the other day that the average 401k is only $100,000, which I couldn't maintain my standard of living on $100,000 for like a decade. And this is anecdotal, but I do know an elderly gentleman who is past retirement age, lives near the beach. And I asked him, what are you going to do if you run out of money? And he told me he's going to drink a lot of whiskey and go swim with the fishes. So, and his reason was financial.
That sounds like some old man shit to say, though.
Right? Yeah. Swim with the fishes. I was like, okay. So
I know multiple old men that will like have a drink with me and be like, by the way, if I start to slip, let's go camping, and I don't come back. And I'm like, why do you want me to? There's multiple men that want me to kill them. Yeah. They're like, I'm like their murder guard in the event that but for them, it's always senility. It's always like if senility occurs, they want out. They want to tap out.
Yeah, everybody says that until it's time to go on that camping trip.
I know, right? I've been
then
told.
It's like, I don't know.
Listen,
I'm not
get in the car. Get in the car.
I'm not throwing my fastball the same way anymore, but I should run for president again.
I've been told independently by my divorced parents, so they don't compare notes on this, that if they ever wanted someone, like if they were in a lot of pain and they trusted someone to like take them out,
it's me.
They both think it's me.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Thank God.
And they said that with love, where there was just like, yeah, you would be the one to kill us. And I was like, why do my parents think I'm the murderer in the family?
I don't know why I'm jealous that you guys have multiple people that want you to kill them. Nobody in my life has ever said that to me. Maybe I'm not trustworthy.
Yeah, that Justin there, he looks hard, but he's soft.
I know, yeah.
In the end, you need to be able to look into the man's eyes and pull the trigger and say bon voyage.
They don't think I could do it. I'll fucking show you.
You know, honestly, the reason I wouldn't ask you to kill me was for your own good, because I don't think that you'd be able to keep it to yourself. I think you'd want to like live stream my death and make content out of it, and like I think you'd end up in jail.
Content poisoned.
Yeah, you need someone who's got like a dark soul that can like keep a secret and not screw themselves over. But I think you might be like, well, you know, there was this one time where my friend needed a lot of morphine and I did it for it. Like, I would be afraid that you would.
Think loose lips sink death ships.
Yeah, I think you'd sink your own ship.
Yeah.
That would be my fear. But here is
that didn't make me feel better. That made me feel worse.
I think you just feel guilty about it, and I don't want to laden your poor soul with that, Justin.
That's better.
There you go.
Thank you.
And I already have a death pact with a friend. I already know who's going to kill me. So
Justin, be very clear.
Wait, does everybody have this? I don't have one of those.
No, I just quietly fly to Switzerland and go with Dignitas, I think. I would take care of it myself.
Oh, that's a better plan than mine.
Yeah, I'm going to...
You certainly talk about...
If any fucker's going to kill me, it's going to be a Swissman. That's for goddamn sure.
You talk about suicide more than anyone that I have ever met.
Yeah.
I think it makes so much sense. Like,
suicide?
Yes. This is not a popular opinion of mine. I know this, but like... I get it.
Well, it's your first unpopular opinion this episode.
I know, right? But I look at what I've done for my pets. Like when they're having a terrible quality of life, like I off them and I figure that it's a kind thing to do.
What is the line of like, oops, I couldn't pay my cable bill 2 months in a row. I guess I should kill myself? Or is it I don't have legs and my eyeballs are in my nose?
Well, and that's the thing. The line depends on who you are. And there are certain points in my life that I'm glad that I didn't have a gun around because, like I said, it makes a lot of sense to me. So, but in that vein, like when I found out last night that we were going to talk about this, I do know that there's a particular class of people which I think does kind of explain the 25 to 35. Our young veterans are killing themselves at shocking rates. We're at, and it's been steady at around 6,000 of them per year.
Yeah.
And so I decided to get more information about that, and there was a hearing about veteran suicides. I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to this. And was shocked to hear that damn near the entire thing was talking about pairing MDMA, which is known on the street as ecstasy or Molly, pairing that drug with therapy. So I guess the way this works is that you'll have like 1 to 2 therapists in a room with you where you're all comfy, like in a bed, and you take a shitload of ecstasy and then you talk it out. And the theory behind it is that MDMA floods your brain with serotonin. So all of that anxiety and depression and stuff that makes you not want to talk about the things, it goes away.
It also has a pacifying effect on your amygdala, which controls your fight or flight response. So you're able to talk about the horrible thing that happened without being triggered by it.
Yes. And so it's helping people process these emotions, and they're finding amazing results with this type of therapy, which I didn't even realize they've not only been testing for years, but the FDA is now in the process of approving MDMA for medical use as soon as next year. So not only is the VA actively trying to figure out how they're going to set up centers all over the country and hire enough therapists to be able to administer this as soon as it becomes legal, but this could also be used in private practice. And it makes so much sense to me because I think a lot of the depression or, the idea that your only function in life is to provide for a family and you're useless after that, I do think that having these sessions where you really think about this and get these feelings that you're a bigger, I mean, I don't want to say like a bigger piece of the puzzle. I actually find that when I get in those moments, I feel very small, which I find comforting. It allows me to have kind of a frivolous life and know that like I'm not that big of a deal. But to be able to have this intense therapy, which is assisted by these drugs, I do think that this could help our overall suicide rates, not just in veterans, but for all of us. And so it does give me a lot of hope that these therapies, which the tests have been overwhelmingly positive with very few side effects that are negative, if any. I really didn't hear any discussion of any negative side effects now that I think about it. I think this is going to be a real opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years to take a big chunk of that suicide statistic and bring it way down.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, especially for veterans. I mean, I think we owe those people the ability for them to have some kind of way to work through what they've gone through. I don't know that is a scalable solution, at least in terms of the rates that we are seeing now. I do worry about there being, and I'm not a spiritual person, I don't subscribe to a religion, but I do feel that there is kind of a drift nature to our kind of current spiritual meta, and be that to a higher power, or be that to a philosophy, or to something for which, like you mentioned, that you could feel small next to. We're very, very dialed into the now, and I don't think that the human brain is built for us to be totally happy in our circumstances, because right now we are living at the peak of civilization, and we get new things every second. Even if you are struggling financially, you are leaps and bounds beyond somebody that is struggling financially in the bottom billion. And the negative elements of our world, I think, loom large, and they haunt us. They become demons in the shadows. I don't have a solution for it, but it is something the older that I get. And one of the benefits of age is you start to just notice the same patterns over and over. And I do think that there's a reason why some of these specific age groups, like between 25 and 35, that's the first time you kind of realize, oh, I've done a loop around. My brain's fully formed. I'm out. No one's expecting me to be a child. They're expecting me to be an adult. And then you start to take a look toward your future and you say, oh, this forever?
Yeah.
And some people have a really, really, really bad reaction to that. I mean, I know the most depressed I've ever felt was in that range.
Oh, me too. I went and sold timeshares in Hawaii.
Yeah.
I had a midlife crisis real early.
But I do feel that there's something, something between that disconnection point that you mentioned, Andrew, and the fall of really, really dedicated people to either a philosophy or a religion for which there's some kind of outgassing.
I think that these are one and the same, or they're deeply connected.
Okay.
So I am also very secular, and I think the loss of religion in the United States and the developed world has been good in the sense that we're not like old medieval religion where you could burn witches and things. I'm glad we got rid of that. But the purpose provided and the community provided have been an existential loss to a tremendous amount of people. People need to have a sense of purpose in life, and they want to have a schema. We want to have a schema that tells us, hey, it's not a series of random chaos and bullshit and just falling into rakes until you die. There is a purpose to this. This is how you factor into this. We very much want that. And religion provides that. Whether it's correct or not, it does give you a filter to look at the world, to be able to get through the day. And it gives you, this is your role in the world, and this is why you're here. And you can now function through that. That's a very important thing. And I think, I've mentioned it on the show before, I don't think we've actually become less religious. I think we've just become more political. I think politics has become the new religion. And I think,
sweet.
I think I brought this up last. Yeah, but
That's why I'm making money.
Yeah,
Like that.
like I brought this up last week. Somebody over at AEI did data or did crunch the numbers on this, where people that self-report being very lonely are 7 times more likely to report being very political. So it seems to me that people that would otherwise very much benefit from being a part of a church or a synagogue or a mosque or an Elks Lodge or a Rotary Club, some kind of group, are desperately trying to glom onto politics as this ersatz religion that provides purpose and community. And it's the worst. It's the worst ersatz substitute you could pick. Go to Comic-Con, get into Star Trek, get into poker, do anything. This is you're joining a religion predicated on defeating the other person. There's no way to be in this religion without defeating the bad guys. It's not a good religion to join. Don't make it your religious identity.
But you can hear your own voice on C-SPAN.
You can hear your own voice on C-SPAN. And I think like in the same way that we've lost those churches. It's not just the purpose and the meaning that you allude to, Justin, but it is the community there. The community is a really wonderful element. I miss that tremendously about when I was religious. I was a part of a small, wonderful parish when I was in Oklahoma. I love those people. I'll start crying thinking about them. When I got fired a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, I think them knowing I was an atheist, like they knew it. I've been gone for a while, called me to make sure I was okay and asked if I needed any money. Like that's how wonderfully decent these people in Norman, Oklahoma were. I truly miss them. And that like, I'm not going to get that from like a book club, right? Like I'm not going to get that.
How'd they find out you got fired?
Still follow me. Like
you just listened to the show, and you were like,
like some of the kids that I knew when I was in college and they were in kindergarten will like call me up a couple times a year just to see how I'm doing, and I'll chat with them, and then I'll swing through every couple of years and say hi to everybody. So like the connection, and I think that some of them will just occasionally listen to the podcast and things.
Yeah,
and so they stay in touch.
If you went to Heaton's church, email in.
Yeah. Shout out to
email in.
St. Elijah's and Holy Ascension.
Yeah, we're not wrongpod@gmail.com.
But I think that's been a major loss. And
because I want one of you to be my suicide buddy. Because it's certainly not these two. They doubt me.
I mean, I'll kill you. You haven't
asked
me to kill you
that
yet.
ship fucking sailed. You said I wouldn't be able to stop myself from live streaming your suicide. I don't trust you.
Live streamed your wife's LASIK surgery.
Not untrue, but that was not my suggestion. She wanted it live streamed.
Can I go back to Jen's unpopular crux earlier on I would kill myself under certain circumstances?
Yeah.
I don't disagree, and I think the relevant distinction there is checkmate versus abysmal anguish, right? So like for me, if I ever get Alzheimer's and there's no cure anywhere nearby, I'm leaving. I'm not going through that. I'm not doing that. I will fly to Switzerland, or I will drive to Portland, or I will come over to Justin's house with a shovel. Or
will you swim with the fishes?
Or I'll go swimming with Jen. One of the two. I don't know. That's and I think a lot of people would have a very similar bright line to that. And I wouldn't fault them. And I don't know that I would even try to. I would want to talk with somebody if that happened in my family. But if somebody in my family went, I have Alzheimer's, I've seen what this does, I don't want to go through it, I would want to talk to them and have a very full conversation, but I'd probably fly with them to Switzerland or something and support them in that decision. The people that I'm most worried about are people beneath that bright line where there's no existential, uncontrollable element that is compelling them to do that, but rather life has just become so sad that they want to opt out. That's the group that I'm very much worried about, because that is a level of pain nobody should have to go through, and hopefully a level of pain that can be ameliorated through either better mental health or medication or better community or purpose.
I think
or drugs.
I think that's a situation where there's a difference to me between a sustained darkness or a scenario in which this is not allowed to, or you're not going to recover, right? And then temporary moments that get way too dark, that allow you to start thinking really, really, really dark things, and that if you took a nap or got more sleep or drank more water or just any of the dumb things that make your life better, that you'd probably recover from it, that tomorrow would look brighter than today. And that's I think the class that you want to save.
But I think that's precisely the class that can be helped with these new therapies. So I do have some hope for this.
Like why are we going back to this?
No, because I listened to a 3-hour hearing about it last night, and listening to the people from the Veterans Administration and
I'm for it. I'm for it.
Yeah, and seeing like it wasn't just, I think because the Veterans Administration is the one leading the way, even the Republicans who you could tell were like, their asses were a little in a twist about it. Like you could tell that they're like, but this is so overwhelmingly positive for the veterans. Like I can't be against this. And so they expressed caution, but they didn't express any inclinations to stand in the way of it. So I feel like where it's going to start with veterans, I do think that if we see what they're seeing in these trials, just this amazing benefit where you get this therapy once and you're not cured. I mean, you still have this, you know, the issues.
It's very effective.
You've learned how to process
Clinically.
these things.
Yeah.
I do think that this could be applied to the general population, and it's the people that get the SADs, that have the, you know, the trauma that they never dealt with. Those are the people, or just have like the day-to-day.
We are a very medicated
life.
public, especially for antidepressants. Like we have never prescribed more antidepressants than we do currently.
Well, and so they had some veterans that were testifying in this hearing, and they were saying that the antidepressants that we prescribe now, and I know this from, I have plenty of friends that take them, but they don't help you deal with the issues. They just like make your feelings feel less. They just kind of make you feel blah.
Yeah.
Where the MDMA therapy, they said like that helped with my actual issues. That helped me deal with the fact that, you know, that like I walked in and saw my mother and her friends had been murdered, and every time I heard a dog scratch, I didn't understand why I had a panic attack. And then she remembered in the therapy, like, oh, that day the dog was scratching the door before I walked in. Made that connection. Now she can hear a dog scratch and doesn't freak out. So these feelings that she was having that she didn't know the source of it. She just felt I was nuts.
Yeah.
Got to the basis of it and felt better. So it's the people that have, which is so many people, those kinds of issues. I think seeing that these therapies are working so well for veterans who have PTSD that most of us can't even imagine, it does give me hope for the general population, where I think a lot of people do have the SADs, and it's not because they're, you know, broke or elderly or don't want to be a burden. I mean, I think that's a class of its own. But the people that are dealing with stuff and just don't want to deal with it anymore, I think this could be a real help. And listening to that particular hearing, I was not expecting that. I was expecting this hearing to be just a sad, hopeless, you know, like we're losing all these veterans and we need to take their guns away. Like that's where I was expecting it to go. I was not expecting to come out of that hearing so hopeful, but that's where it led me.
You're absolutely right, by the way, that's going to be best served from going through the Veterans Administration.
Yeah.
There's some term for this, but I can't remember what it is. But basically, there's a good deal of literature and data in terms of changing people's minds, that it's very difficult to change somebody's mind of somebody that is like on a different team or a different culture. The people that are really good at changing your mind are the people you mostly agree with, that have a differing opinion. So like, for example, I am not going to be a good candidate to go to the Democratic Socialists of America and explain why markets are good. I'm not going to sound very good, right? But conversely, if I go to a group of conservatives while I'm an independent and I go, listen, I think it would make sense for our city to have a dedicated amount of social housing to house homeless people. This will actually be more fiscally responsible for us because it's cheaper for the city to do that than to have them coming in and out of jail all the time. I sound like a guy that they're like, okay, he seems like a math guy and he seems like a fiscal conservative. Like maybe there's a point to this. Whereas like if somebody with a bunch of beads and, you know, like crazy hair comes in talking about how we're in late stage capitalism, like dismissed immediately. So same
beads in hair.
Same things with drugs. Like if like somebody with a Burning Man T-shirt comes in to talk about it, the general population, or particularly the more conservative elements of society, are going to be more suspect. But if like a general comes in and is like, look, we're being pragmatists about this, like MDMA is a medicine and we're using it medically and we think that there's windfall benefits to it, like they're going to have a decent chance of being able to change minds on it. And I think, Jen, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a tremendous windfall that can and will be gained from psychedelics in general. MDMA, psilocybin, LSD, there's been like, we really cut ourselves off in the 60s when we criminalized all these drugs. From a lot of palliative things that could go on, like with addiction too. There's some evidence to show that because these are dealing with neuronal connections or neuron connections and being able to create new neuron connections, that they might be palliative in terms of addiction, which would be huge. So there is really good stuff that could potentially be around the corner to help a lot of people.
Yeah, especially in a clinical setting.
We're Not Wrong Pod at
s-
Gmail.
Sorry, before we close up, can we just do the obligatory thing here? Hey, like, I've been on antidepressants. I think you've been on antidepressants.
No, I've never taken medication. No.
I've been on them. I've been to therapy. I imagine we've all been to therapy. All I'm saying is, I know that there are people who are listening that are probably having a very difficult time. Don't feel the slightest bit uncomfortable asking for help.
Yes.
So many people, I'm one of them, have had to struggle with mental health issues. I think you should look at it medically. Like if you sprained your ankle, it would be irresponsible of you not to go to the doctor and get your ankle checked. Don't feel ashamed. People love you.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I'm in therapy right now, and it's really helpful for me. So.
I'm burying all my feelings. We're Not Wrong Pod at Gmail. It's a joke, but don't do that. Don't do that. We're Not Wrong Pod at gmail.com. We're Not Wrong Pod at gmail.com. Justice writes, it all makes sense now. Doug Batman tore his ACL fighting crime and didn't take painkillers in case the city needed him.
God, Doug Batman is not the superhero we wanted, but he's the superhero we needed.
Throw in the towel writes, why is the U.S. on the hook for deciding when the Ukraine war needs to end? If Ukraine wants to fight, we should support them. Sure, after 2 years, it's a stalemate, but at the 2-year mark of World War II, Germany controlled almost all of Europe and was steamrolling Russia. Should we have told the British to pack it up and that they're done?
I will see your World War II and invoke World War I. That maybe we shouldn't have been involved in World War I. Look, these are high stakes, right? I think the pro-Ukraine side, or the pro-funding Ukraine side, I should say, that is the majority of the American people and politicians, I think, is very worried that if Russia is not stopped now, it will be emboldened, as will other bullies on the international stage, and therefore this is a global fight for law and democracy that America is obligated to fund because we can. The flip side that I am concerned about is that this is intractable, that it is going to be drug out, and that the losers of this will inevitably be the Ukrainian people, and that they will have a lot of collateral damage for what will end up being the same result. I am open to funding this, but I would say that a good starting position, if we're going to continue funding this, would be to be readily open to just discussing what an outcome would look like peacefully at this point. I would be very happy if Anthony Blinken or Joe Biden called Putin and said, what would you need? We're not committing to anything. What would you need in order to cease hostilities here? Because if it was Ukraine doesn't join NATO, I think that would be a pretty good deal at this point if they'd pull out. Unlikely, but all the same.
Yeah, and to answer your question more literally, why is the U.S. on the hook for deciding when the Ukraine war needs to end? Because we are the main funders of this. In the hearings that I've been watching about Ukraine, it has become crystal clear to me that we are funding their entire government. Ukraine's entire tax base, all of the money they collect in taxes is going to the war. All of the money that they use to take care of their people is coming from the United States taxpayer. So that is why we are such a key player here and why the decision really does rest with our government, because without our government, this is over. And so no matter what your opinion is, whether you want to continue the war or not, what the United States decides to do is the decisive call, whether we like it or not. And that's why this is so urgent, and it's just the way it is.
I had a great conversation that'll be Friday's PX3 episode with a former military man. He worked in anti-tank stuff and now does open source intelligence analyst. He's an open source intelligence analyst, and he made the argument that we should be arming Ukraine quite simply because missiles go bad, which is something that I didn't know, that there is a point, an expiration date on missiles.
Oh, so this is like when you're clearing your pantry and you're like, might as well just send it down to the kitchen, the soup kitchen.
He described times when he and his group just had to fire missiles, and their job was just to fire missiles because it was cheaper.
They were going to spoil. They were going to get botulism.
Literally.
That's crazy.
Literally. The fuel goes bad, and so you have to send them back to Raytheon, and they demilitarize them. But that costs more than just having a fun Saturday and shooting it at a bunch of trash cans that you set up in the ridge. And so that's what they would do. He said, I never thought I would get bored of shooting missiles until that day when we had to shoot so many missiles that it became, at a certain point, monotonous. So his argument was, all of these things are going to cost us money anyway to demilitarize them with Raytheon. you might as well send them to Ukraine if there's any kind of gain from them to be had in Ukraine, and they are begging for them.
That is a fascinating position. I've never heard that before.
I had never heard that before. Ukraine Facts writes, it's commonly been overlooked that under Article 83 of Ukraine's constitution, parliamentary elections cannot be held until the state of emergency has been lifted. Article 157 specifically forbids constitutional changes during a state of emergency. With regards to presidential elections, Zelensky has been open about running next year if elections are possible, but while that election wouldn't be unconstitutional, it would be illegal under their emergency laws. There's currently debate as to whether or not it's possible to change it to allow it.
Which is true, but the entire reason I brought that up is that not having elections is pretty undemocratic, and the fact that it's their constitution and their emergency laws that are facilitating this situation isn't good if you're trying to call Ukraine a democracy.
Texas primary voter writes, you don't have to register for a particular primary to vote in the primary in the state of Texas. You only have to choose which one when you arrive to vote. You can't vote in both, though.
Awesome.
So there we go.
And it's March 15th for Texas, I think?
Super Tuesday.
Super Tuesday.
No. It's after Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday is March 5th. It's on my birthday.
Okay, Justin, do you think it'll be at all competitive in the Republican race by that time? So this will just be rubber.
No.
This will just be a protest open primary vote?
It may not make it to New Hampshire at this point.
Right? That's what's crazy about this. This whole year we were like, we're going to tour with the primaries, and what row?
Yay. Citation writes, I don't believe Andrew's claim that the vast majority of us are doing better wealth-wise. I'm pretty sure that the middle class is drastically shrinking. I'd be thrilled if you can prove me wrong. Wages, benefits, retirement, all that.
Okay,
Keaton, please.
That's a tall order.
Prove him wrong. Humiliate this man or woman.
How about this? Because I don't have the data in terms of median salary or median home ownership directly in front of me. But
a likely story.
Yeah, that's right. There's a red paper in my briefcase entitled "Life is Worse Now. Do not report." And I'm actively trying to suppress this information. What I can do is assuage some of your fears about the shrinking middle class. So, in terms of inequality data in the United States, the data is good. The sorting and analysis are horrible. So what I mean by that is that the actual people filling out papers and the tabulation of it, I don't have a problem with. The way we qualify inequality in the United States is absurd. So let me run you through a couple of things here. Let's say, for our purposes today, that Jen, myself, and Justin all make $100,000 a year, and their respective spouses all make $100,000 a year.
Yay.
According to our census data, we would be living in an incredibly unequal country, because the way that the American census data, that all of the inequality stuff comes off of, all the reports that you read about rising inequality, things like that, they're all stemming from this central data. They count households. So you already have a thing now where if somebody is young and not earning as much money and they're unmarried, they're going to be a poorer household. So again, I could be making the exact same amount of money as Justin and Jen, but because I'm not married, my household is poorer than their household, and that would be considered unequal. Now, you add to that in the 50s, you had a lot more intra-class marriage, where a banker will marry a nurse, or an engineer will marry a school teacher. That has now stopped. We've now sorted socioeconomically in the last few years to where a banker's going to marry a banker, a lawyer's going to marry a doctor's going to marry a lawyer, and so on and so forth. So now you have a situation where two people are both earning $200,000, whereas two people down here are earning $50,000 each. And so it exacerbates that gap that's there. You add to that we're looking at the population as a whole rather than age in it. So people are earning more as they get older than when they're younger. But we look at the data, and what we constantly do again and again and again is we go, kindergartners are the same height this year as they were last year. The kindergartners aren't growing. Well, that's not accurate, because people are moving through these different phases. And then the final bit I'd add to that, and this is the one that I find the most perplexing about all of the inequality data we have in the United States, is we do not factor in tax or government benefits in inequality. So that is to say, in this scenario, okay, Justin and Jen and their respective spouses make $200,000 in a household. I make $20,000 a year. I make $20,000 a year. Boo. So I get $40,000 worth of benefits through food stamps, housing allotments, things like that. And also, their households are paying taxes of 20%. That is not factored in. So in the United States, were you to raise the taxes on the rich, were you to increase the benefits to the poor, it would not affect how we look at inequality. So we have inequality in the United States, but it's basically been the same since the 60s. It was much lower in the 50s. It increases in the 60s. It's not really jumped that much, despite all of the Thomas Piketty sky is falling stuff. And while we have inequality, it's highly exaggerated. So I wouldn't worry about that as much, and I'll get back to you on the other things and hopefully do a full episode.
Yeah, but prove it. Why don't you prove it? Money ruins everything, right? So you're saying, of course it takes a lot of money to run a national campaign. That's our system, and that's capitalism. So by design, only wealthy people should be able to be president, and even in politics, running our country. That's okay. I believe that's directed toward me. And no, I didn't say that. Clean out your fucking ears. That's exactly the opposite of what I always say. In fact, I defend starting in Iowa because it is far cheaper to run. You can bootstrap. You can create a grassroots wave of momentum that earns you more attention and therefore more support, some of which, indeed, is financial either by small donors or large donors. So, no, I think a national primary is a terrible idea, and anybody who supports it is just making sure that only either those selected by big-moneyed interests or naturally wealthy people are going to compete for leadership. Money ruins everything, too. More money, more everything, right? Campaign seasons are so damn long, and because mega donors drive campaign fundraising, no small individual donors. The result is that rich people get to pick who they want to fund long enough to win the primary.
Yes, if only we could get the money out of politics. I have two qualms with your statement there, listener. First, as you will recall, Donald Trump was not a favorite of the donor class in 2016. He was a favorite of small donations that you're alluding to. He was a popular small donation candidate. The donor class hated him and was actively trying to stop him every step of the way until they finally capitulated. So,
well, he was, I don't think you can call him a small donation candidate considering he got so much free airtime. So it wasn't like he raised so much money and then was able to compete. Like, he was such a clown that everyone wanted to come.
But he raised, look, him and Bernie Sanders are the paragons for small dollar donations.
Yeah.
That you can run a national campaign on small dollar donations.
Agreed. Although I also agree with Jen's point, which is that, like, if you want to try and restrict campaign donations and things like that, I do think you're going to get more Donald Trumps because people are going to go for earned media attention. But the other thing that I would add to this, and we kind of hinted at this last week, is if we want to make politics a bigger and bigger part of life, which is what a lot of people want. They want more government, bigger government, Congress to be more actively involved in. If you want government to be more central to important things in the United States and you want the political process to be more dominant in solving problems, I think you're going to get more people paying attention to politics and you're going to have the democratic process enlarged. It stands to reason to me, the bigger government and the bigger politics are in day-to-day life, the bigger campaigns are going to get, the more people are going to be interested in it, the more people paying attention, and the longer the campaigns are going to be.
Yeah, I think small dollar donations have materially affected politics. To pretend that we are still living in the 90s or the 2000s where you needed gigantic donors is, I think, foolhardy. You're not seriously paying attention to the system if you think that. In a lot of ways, what is the reality is that gatekeepers, what we had understood as gatekeepers in our society 20 years ago, now actively follow any kind of incremental stuff because they want to see that they are not going to be throwing money at something that's not going to succeed. So they will look at small dollar donors and people who get a lot of money in small dollar donations and then say, okay, well, now I will back you for X amount. But your ability to raise money from small dollar donors is huge. You need to be able to do it in our modern system, and it's not, I think, the boogeyman scenario that people were painting in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s when the conversation about donors, quote unquote, buying elections, I think, was at its zenith, in my opinion. Snake Draft Primary writes, the primaries would be completed in the order that the states joined the United States. So in 2024, the order would state Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut, ending with Alaska and Hawaii. Then in 2028, they would go in reverse order, where Hawaii would go first and then Delaware last. Are you guys into this?
No, because then the middle is irrelevant.
Yeah, no, I think either, I think we should just switch contests. Like 1 year Miss America contest in order of winning, they do the primaries. Then the following year America's Got Talent. Then the following year NASCAR or something like that. I like the idea of shaking it up, though. I like where your head's at, listener.
Do you know what a snake draft is?
No. Well, is it what I think it is?
I would love to know what you think it is.
You're at like some kind of snake race. And you get to pick your snake. Like if Jen and I were both racing snakes, we had our own team. You know how you like get to get kids for kickball? Like you do that and you're like, well, I'll take that rattler there. And Jen's like, I'll take the cottonmouth.
Can I guess what it is?
No.
Especially now that he's talking about kids.
What's that?
Is it whoever has the biggest dick?
Do you not know what a snake draft is?
Apparently not. No.
You play fantasy football.
Not with snakes.
How do you do your draft?
So how have we done it? I know.
Is it auction?
No. Oh, so we've done it a couple different ways. My favorite one is we all went to Vegas and we all picked a number and then we played roulette, and so whoever was closest, it was like a whole thing.
Got into an order.
Yeah.
And then you draft in that order.
Yeah.
And then in the second round, you would go the opposite way, and then you would go the opposite way.
Yeah, so you go forward and back.
Like
yeah, that's how Yahoo is set up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it has nothing to do with measuring dicks.
No.
But if you were going to do it that way, snake draft.
If you were a Southern gentleman and we're talking about measuring dicks, you might say, oh, I think that boy's in a snake draft.
I've been to 2 rattlesnake derbies in my life, and they're a lot of fun. For real, I've eaten a couple beating rattlesnake hearts. I went out to Mangum, Oklahoma, back when I was in college, and they so there's all these things called rattlesnake derbies in western Oklahoma. It's kind of like Whomping Day from The Simpsons,
where
there's too many rattlesnakes out in the western part of the state. So people will go out with sticks and pillowcases, and they'll just collect rattlesnakes to kind of do a culling of the general snake population. And then in Mangum, what they do is they all dump them into a big pit. And then you just kind of look at the big pit of snakes, and then a couple of days, like some snake handling priests will come in, or preachers will come in, and they'll get bit, and they'll blame it because their lack of faith. So it's like a whole fun thing for everybody to watch, these guys playing with the snakes. And then they'll you can get them cooked at there's like a little rattlesnake burger shop, kind of like a hot dog. And you can go out and go snake hunting. I went with these 2 old dudes, like Zeke and Curtis or something. I don't know what their names were, but these 2 old dudes took me out.
Snake drafting?
I got snake drafted. They took me out on a bus, me and my buddy Evan. We went out into the Badlands, and they like were pulling snakes out and like playing with them and stuff, and like explaining them. And one of them went, Andy, how far do you think a rattler, an adult rattler, can strike from head to tail? And I was like, God, I don't know, maybe 4 feet. And then he rolled his sleeve back and showed me scars, and he went, in my experience, about this much further than you thought. So that's what I thought a snake draft was.
So this is one of the many reasons why I love you, Andrew. Is that you always come into the room and you're so tall and handsome and impeccably dressed, and you seem so sophisticated, and then you come out with the most redneck stories.
Yeah. This is all fucking cosplay. This is all. I cannot stress this.
Have you not figured that out?
All
the male honey boo.
Yeah.
Have we given up on names for the fan base? Right. Here are some great ideas. Triceratopses, but it's TRI. Arguers, openers, and Jen and Jussers.
What the fuck?
When do we agree?
Yeah, am I out?
Yeah. I'm a proud Jen and Jusser.
I mean, I don't hate it, but
just because I do like people identifying factionally.
I'm the and. Okay, so it's both a conjoining word and me. So
I don't like
Jen
it anymore.
and Just.
I don't like it anymore. I liked it when it was just
when it was just you and I.
Yeah, exactly. When it's just describing a listener who hates Heaton.
Yeah, we're just anti you.
I like openers because it kind of sounds like maybe you're into wife swapping or something. Like I think like openers is a weird. Like you're like I'm an opener. And you're like, oh, Jesus, okay.
I thought you were just into snake drafting, but it turns out he's a full-blown opener. A Know Nothing writes, Heaton has previously convinced me to caucus for Doug Bergman in Iowa, but after listening to Jen's very persuasive arguments, I will instead be caucusing for Doug Batman. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Go, Doug.
You can always tell the emails that come from political orphanage listeners, writes, Heaton's understanding of property acquisition lacks nuance. He states that we should nationalize royal property because it is unjustly seized, but his analysis stops there and doesn't consider second-order effects. Should the state seize all property from all parties that was unjustly gained by ancestors? Why are the royals special? If they are, what orders of nobility are no longer special? Dukes? What if property was unjustly stolen but sold to a third party? What about British wealth generation that occurs as a direct result of colonial actions from the East? You'd struggle to find an atom in Britain that was fairly and justly passed from owner to owner in an unbroken chain to its modern owner. Heaton, your retort.
First, I love the critical mail that I get from I think this is one of my listeners too. I agree based
Oh,
on
you think?
based on the wording of this. Like I have to like
Things go from zero to Frasier real fucking fast when the orphanage.
Yeah. No,
when the orphans roll in.
It's great. It's
Oh, my
always
God.
like dear sir, comma, I took umbrage with your latest quip.
This
Like,
this fun round table gets fucking doused in tossed salads and scrambled eggs.
Yeah. It's great. Thank you for your okay. So you are wrong and I am right. Let me tell you why. I don't think you have to universalize this into a like Russian Revolution style societal economic purge. The crown is different than the royal family. The crown is an institution and it's an estate. So it is different than private property. And I think it would be it would not be politically easy, but it would be legislatively possible to isolate the crown estate as opposed to all noble things in Britain. To give you an example, Balmoral Palace up in Scotland is the private property of Prince Charles, or King Charles. He inherited it from his mother. She inherited it from her dad. It's their private property. That's different than the Crown Estate. The Crown Estate, which is a couple of duchies, it's a ton of land. It's just a bunch of land that the Crown as an institution holds. So like Charles, who is the king, could not just give it away, or he couldn't divvy it up equally between his kids. It will go to whoever the head of the royal family is when he dies. That's worth about $14 billion. And I'm looking at that going, that's not something that the crown needs. It's not something that they developed. It's not something that they did anything with. They just inherited something that was taken from other people that's sitting right there. And I would put that in a sovereign wealth fund for the benefit of all of the British people. I don't think you have to get into liquidating other noblemen or, trying to puree William or anything like that.
All right, go.
He's really taking this seriously.
I know.
Real dumbass question for you. What is Prince Charles's last name?
I guess it would be Windsor, but I don't think they really have one.
So they're all just like Cher and Madonna. They just go by their
It used
first
to
name.
be, I'm going to get this right, it used to be like Gotha Hohenzollern because they were straight up German for a very long time. Like Queen Elizabeth was the first actually British monarch that was like British at quite some time. Like people had been born over there, but it was usually their mom was German or their dad was German or something like that. But the British royal family was very, very, very German up until World War I, because they could only marry Protestants, and the only people that were Protestant and kings and queens running around Europe were the Germans, Prussians, and things like that. So they were like the Hohenzollern, Golgotha, I can't remember, the very German-sounding name, and then they decided they debated naming themselves England. They debated naming themselves something else, and they finally went with Windsor. So if
on the birth certificate, it's probably Charles Windsor.
I doubt it even says that. I think that they are so sui generis within British circles that it probably just says,
His Royal Highness,
His Royal Highness
yeah.
Charles, Duke of Prince of Wales or something like that. But yeah, if here in America, if you meet Prince Harry and you want to be formal with him and American at the same time, you would call him Mr. Windsor.
Windsor.
Mr.
Okay.
Windsor.
Mr. Windsor.
That'd be a good name for a podcast. I Made a Funny brings us home. Listening to you all debate a topic reminds me of that scene in TMNT 2, The Secret of the Ooze, where the turtles are explaining how Shredder was defeated at the end of the previous movie. One of the turtles says something and another says he's right. Then a different turtle says something seemingly contradictory, and the turtle by April then says he's right. And then he goes back and forth like that for a bit before Splinter shows up and makes them all do backflips as punishment for goofing off.
Well, his edibles sure kicked in.
I haven't seen. I used to love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when I was a little kid. I haven't seen or thought of them in easily 2 decades. Wow.
What was
Deep cut.
You don't have a favorite movie?
I was big on Raphael. Or no, hold on.
That's a turtle, not a
that
moon.
was a turtle,
yeah. I'm just thinking, which was the purple one? I liked him, the scientist one.
Donatello.
Was that Donatello?
Donatello.
That was the one I liked.
Jesus,
Yeah.
classic Donatello.
No one's favorite is Donatello.
I don't
No, the nerds fetishize Donatello.
Yeah.
Really?
But
Yeah.
I don't remember any particular
Fucking
movie now.
body pillow humpers.
Did you ever play the video game?
Yeah, the arcade game.
Yeah,
Fun
with all the
game. Love the
pizzas.
arcade game. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good game.
That's like
Oh, you know our friend Darren has a
I
full
know.
cabinet.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean a cabinet of pizzas or turtles or video games?
The 4-person cabinet that like we could go
Yeah.
to his house
The-
and
In
play
his
the game.
home?
In
his
fact,
home, yeah.
when
God, I
I
love
was
him.
last over there, not too far from here, he was like, cue sad Charlie Brown music kicking the curb, and he's like, "But I can't get anybody to play Ninja Turtles with me." And I was
Oh,
like, "I'll come
Darren.
play Ninja Turtles with you."
Yeah,
Like,
hit me up.
yeah.
Well, we got a party on Saturday, so maybe the after party we can make our way over to there and play some Ninja Turtles.
I can't wait to see them.
We're Not Wrong is a production of Dog and Pony Show Audio. Our editor is Will Saddleberg. I'll go first here on the plugs. I really, really, really enjoyed my conversation with Ryan Macbeth. He is the open source intelligence analyst for the military. If you want to get a sense from a military perspective, we brought him on to talk about misinformation during war, and specifically from his point of view as somebody who makes his living trying to understand what the state of play is in various wars. He breaks down the Israel-Gaza conflict. He breaks down the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and then throws in a few more terrifying wars that may or may not happen between now and 2027. I was left materially shaken by the time that we were done, and you can be too, listening to Politics on Friday. Heaton, what's on the ORF?
A few weeks ago, I met a new friend here in Austin that works with various housing groups, and he showed me deed restrictions. Now, I don't know that you would have encountered these, Jen, because neither of us are homeowners. Did you have a deed restriction, or is your house new enough that you didn't have to deal with that, Justin?
I don't remember one.
Okay, so there are deed restrictions rife throughout Texas, but also throughout the United States. That will be a deed. You own the home, but the dead guy who originally owned the home has in perpetuity put restraints on what you can do with the house. For example, sell it to a black person. Or on a more benign level, you have to maintain the cedar trees in the back. You cannot replace the cedar trees. Or you cannot have, you can never build a garage. I found this mind-blowing. I've never bought a house, but you're fucking dead. Go away. I'm not doing ghost chores for you, fucking racist ghost. Go away. I'll sell my house 15 times to black people if I feel so inclined. So I talked to him about deed restrictions and this kind of fascinating world of contract law that can kind of bind your property in perpetuity, and the kind of difficult question, which is if we're not going to have overzoning, which I rant about all the time, and we just want people to handle things through private contract, like how do you end up keeping these things from accumulating while still letting people, make collective decisions with people in their neighborhood? We all want our houses to look like they're made out of stucco or something. So we're talking about that on the Political Orphanage.
Nice.
Yeah,
Jen.
sounds good. As happened so many times, I haven't done an episode since we last talked. So I actually, because we had, I think was a pretty good debate about Israel and Gaza. One of the shows that I listen to regularly that I just feel like recommending is Rising. It's a production of The Hill, but Monday.
Is that Robbie Suave?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I love Robbie Suave. He's
It's
a good
Robbie
dude.
Suave and Brianna Joy Gray, and they disagree all the time. But why I think this particular audience would enjoy them is that they do it in such a friendly way. You can tell that they like each other, and when they disagree, they at least try to keep it not personal. I actually think we do a better job of it, but
Yeah, you think that bitch.
Does Jen know about the super secret bonus episode we do with just the two of us? Or did she know about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Jen Was Wrong podcast?
Yeah.
Did you see what she was wearing today?
she looks like a homeless person again. Yeah, I just think they do a really good job of having very hard conversations pretty much on a daily basis about interesting things, and they're also keeping me up to date. A lot of the information that I have about Israel Gaza, I'm getting from their daily updates. And Robbie is very much representing the Israel side, and Brianna is very much representing the Palestinian side. and doing it in a way that doesn't make me want to scream. So if you liked our conversation and if you don't hate me at this point, I think you might like Rising.
Look at that.
I usually agree with Robbie on things. I'm friends with Robbie. We both know each other through reason. Just picture like a more hip, attractive version of me. That's kind of like that's.
Andrew, you don't know you're gorgeous, do you?
Thank you.
My God.
Thank you.
He doesn't. It's amazing. Like Robin, no bad things to say about Robbie, but like, no.
Thank you. That being said, Robbie's like H&M cool, trendy, hot, whereas I'm Frasier hot. I'm fine with it.
No.
Is H&M cool and trendy?
No, I would say you're like professor hot.
Yeah, you're hot for
Yeah.
teacher hot.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's
And I should be entering my golden years of
there was
professor hot, right?
there was a
Yeah.
there was a 1965 social experiment that went viral on wherever I saw it. But it was like this black and white footage of teenagers, boys and girls, reacting to meeting a very attractive teacher. And so it's two teenage girls and a very attractive teacher sits down and is like, well, I'm going to be teaching your class, but it's 1960s, so and then he leaves and they keep the camera on the girls, and the girls are like very descriptive of why he's attractive. It's like oh my, they're like New Yorkers, so it's like, oh my God, his eyes, like it's just like, oh, and I think he's young, blah blah blah, and they're having like this whole conversation. The boys. The woman leaves, and they're just like, wow. Wow. Anyway.
Yeah, usually when girls see a hot male teacher, they kind of like keep it to themselves and keep it quiet. But we did have this one girl in high school. We had this gorgeous teacher, and he had to be in his early 20s. Like, he wasn't that far from our age, and he looked like he was straight out of Melrose Place. He was so hot. And of course, I didn't say a word about it. But she, who's also very pretty, total jailbait, was just shamelessly hitting on him during all day, every day. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. And it was like a joke, but I did take her aside and I'm like, are you serious about any of this? And she's like, oh yeah, I'd sleep with him right here, right now in front of anyone. No problems. Like, and this went on for an entire year. And she's probably my favorite person in the universe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did she get him?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Did she beg him?
Because
I don't
usually,
think so.
sometimes with those cases, there's like a Thanksgiving back from college that that can really go down.
Well, she was straight furious because this teacher, who was not a French teacher, ended up being the chaperone for a trip that I was on because I did take French, and we got to go to Paris for a week. Hello, privilege. But we got to go to Paris, and he was one of the chaperones.
Oh, and she wanted her shot.
Yeah, she took
I'm
Spanish. She's
graduating
like,
and I just turned 18. Teehee.
Well, and I think, no, we were only juniors, so we're definitely still jailbait, but she was furious that because she took Spanish, she didn't get the chance to harass him overseas and stay in the same hotels.
There's different cultural norms in France.
Well, and there was supervision, but like, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, she was really mad about her language choices in high school.
You want to know what else has been a lot of fun? This episode. For Andrew Heaton and Jen Brandy, I'm Justin Robert Young. We're not wrong.
Good job.
Yes.
I'm going to use the bathroom right